It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the Nottingham families call for a retrial for Valdo Calocane amid yet another damning report into how he was handled by the authorities. NHS England revealing today the paranoid schizophrenic's condition wasn't resistant to treatment, rather he rejected help. And when he didn't engage with mental health services, he was simply discharged to his GP. Today, the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Kumar and Ian Coates demanded that the case is looked at again and the doctors who treated him are named and held accountable in the hope that their failings can never be repeated.
I've been engaging with a lady who messaged me to say, and the reason I did read the message was it said, Emma, my son's going to be the next Valdo Calocane. Can you help?
Meanwhile, more failings by authorities over the Southport attack as the Prevent counter-terrorism programme is criticised for ending its involvement with the attacker prematurely.
As the Prime Minister said, Southport must be a line in the sand for our country. If that means asking difficult questions about shortcomings or failings, so be it.
Tonight, we'll be discussing both cases and the failures by the state in carrying out one of its most basic tasks, keeping people safe. Also ahead, an existential threat. Sky News speaks to the man known as the godfather of artificial intelligence, who is warning of the dangers posed by an AI arms race. Plus, back Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne and his old bandmates set to be joined by metal royalty as the Prince of Darkness announces one final gig. And Badger honour this graffiti fan in East Sussex, earning one of the top prizes in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. We've been failed at every turn. Those are the words of the Nottingham families today, as another report laid bare yet more failings by the authorities, which allowed a violent and dangerous man to be free to kill their loved ones. Valdo Calocane killed Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Kumar and Ian Coates in June 2023. As a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, prosecutors decided Calocane shouldn't be tried for murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility, saying his condition was resistant to treatment. But today's report, this one from NHS England, found he actually rejected treatment, refusing to take medication or engage with mental health services. In light of that, the families want him to face a new murder trial, and they want the doctors who failed to treat him appropriately to be named and held accountable. Today's report detailed 2 years of violent and disturbing behaviour, including frightening a neighbour so much that she jumped out of a first-floor window and required surgery, punching a police officer in the face and holding his flatmates at university hostage. The review revealed how the risk to NHS staff was managed by making arrangements for workers not to visit Calocane's home alone. It said he wasn't forced to have long-lasting antipsychotic medication because he didn't like needles. Calocane was sectioned 4 times and admitted to hospital. He had contact with community teams, but on failing to attend appointments or answer calls, he was simply discharged to his GP. He then had no contact with authorities of any kind for 9 months, right up until he killed Barnaby, Grace and Ian. Calocane was sentenced to an indefinite hospital order, having pleaded guilty on those grounds of diminished responsibility. That's something the families have never accepted. And today's report casts fresh doubt on the basis for that conviction. Earlier today, I sat down with Barnaby's mum, Emma, Ian's son, James, and Grace's dad, Sanjoy, who explained why the families now want a retrial.
I think if you don't make a report like this public, I don't think appropriate lessons and the right lessons are learned across the country. And I think for us, all of us, that's actually all we have left. We've lost our dear ones, and the only thing really that we want now is improvements in their name. We never want any families in our country to go through the grief and the heartbreak that we've had to go through, and the battle, the fight we've had to go through. And if you try and cover things up, if you don't release full reports, appropriate lessons are not learned, systems are not changed, people are not changed, and accountability doesn't take place. We are fighting for accountability, and part of that was getting all of this report published so every trust in the country could read it.
Emma, people watching tonight will be shocked that you were forced, as you've put it, to sign an NDA after reading this report. And, you know, Sanjay talks about a cover-up. You've talked about things being brushed under the carpet.
Yeah.
Is that what it felt like? Because the level of detail in this report, for it not to be made public,
Yeah.
is that what you thought was happening?
That is what was happening. We expected better of the NHS, but then we expected better of the police force and the criminal justice system. And I think this is evidence that they're all failing, and there is a very stark, serious need for proper change. And that comes from truth, because if you don't have the facts, then you can't address what's broken. Without going into lots of detail, because it can't be a battle about, you know, how the NHS, you know, and their press teams and senior management decided to deal with this, but it's enough to say it's shameful that we were put through this level of additional torture. And I use that word, I believe, appropriately, because the torture and the trauma that we've had to endure on top of the devastation of losing our children and father is so wrong. We shouldn't be the ones that have to fight and have our voices heard and do press conferences to address these wrongs. But we're doing it, and we will do it for as long as we need to until things change.
Calocane was known to mental health services over a 2-year period. Documentation from the contact during that period paints a picture of a man with deteriorating mental health, a man diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He was sectioned 4 times, was known not to take his medication, mask his symptoms, and known for violence and aggression, punching a police officer in the face, breaking into a neighbour's house, frightening them so much that they jumped from a first-floor window and required surgery, and essentially holding flatmates at university hostage. Now, you knew some of this detail before this report, but the picture that's laid out there, what was it like to see those details, James? Because you have argued all along that this is the public interest, this is an issue of public safety. What was it like to see a picture of the man that killed your father?
It was frustrating that the public have not seen this picture displayed of him. As it was mentioned before in court, his defence team painted him as an upstanding citizen, a man who was going to do higher education and get a master's degree, that was smitten down by his mental health and was resistant to treatment. But this report shows it was completely the opposite. From the 4 sections under the Mental Health Act to him violently assaulting a police officer to the point where he had to be pepper sprayed, tasered to the ground, and over the next 6 days was given intramuscular medication while he was shackled by his hands and his feet because he was such a violent threat to the public, with care workers going to assess him at his home looking for escape routes because they felt uncomfortable and felt that they were a risk to themselves.
They wouldn't visit him at home. He had to come to them because they were so frightened to go to his home.
But there were also abortive visits where they felt too scared because he was too dangerous.
There are voices there in that report, those members of the community care team highlighting the dangers. The repeated reports as well from his own family. None of this taken into account. How did that make you feel, Emma? Because there was one line of the report out of the 200 pages that jumped out to me, and it was a junior doctor. After he was first sectioned, he tried to break out the mental health ward, and the junior doctor reported that he showed no remorse for violent actions. And the quote is, "Perhaps we'll end up killing someone."
Well, the only part of that he got wrong, it wasn't someone, was it? It was 3 people, and it would have been 3 more and many more had he not eventually been stopped. Those people endangering themselves on the ground, in the community, trying to care, trying to support, were reporting their fears, their concerns, and they weren't being listened to, they weren't being addressed. And these are the people that ultimately had the decision to discharge him. The note-taking and the detail is appalling in the NHS, each discharge.
And this is why we want that accountability, because there are teams of people who look after an individual. If a team has a multidisciplinary meeting, an MDT as they call it, they are meant to plan this person's discharge into the community, and that was never done comprehensively. His risks were never assessed. As you have said, the stark facts that you presented 4 times over, we were failed. They had 4 sectioning events are very significant for any patient. And for them to not change their tack 4 times is absolutely unbelievable to us.
And Sandra, you mentioned accountability there, and your wife, Sinead, Grace's mum, made an excellent point earlier in the press conference, making the point that psychiatry, mental health provision, the only branch of medicine where treatment decisions directly impact the safety of others. And we're not just talking about one mistake here, we're talking about a number of mistakes. And when we talk about accountability, because that's what the families want from this...
Partially,
but it is individuals, because so often we get these reports where big public bodies, you know, we have public inquiries, but it is the public body. It is not the individuals, whether that be sort of at the lower end of the scale, middle managers, higher up. There are no names in this report, and it's not a witch hunt. I know you're very clear on that. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be held accountable for not doing their job properly, Sandra.
I think if you don't hold people responsible, people make up systems. This is a branch of medicine that actually steps over into public safety. If I have a patient who comes in and doesn't take their diabetes medicine or high blood pressure medication, they know the consequences of that. But in psychiatry, you know, patients can, if you don't treat them properly, they can go out, they can harm people. They murdered our children. At the end of the day, you cannot have a profession in medicine that's not held accountable for their actions when patients have the potential to go out and murder people.
James, is the fear that without this kind of specific accountability, which we know is so lacking in so many reports and inquiries of this kind, that without that, there will simply be an apology, a promise that things will change, and things will then move on? And then it's up to families like yours to take on that responsibility to keep knocking on the doors and saying, where is the change?
Yeah, I feel without accountability, it'll just be another lesson learned, blanket apology, we'll do better, and it will happen again, and it's happened for decades. For the people of Nottingham that have friends, family, people that they know that are in the mental health trust getting help for whatever ailment they have, to imagine that they could be under the care of the same practitioner that signed him off to his GP because there was no contact with him for those months. It puts fear in there. Like, if you know what your children or what your family members are capable of. I have had multiple people from Nottingham that have contacted me through social media that are going through the similar things that we are. They have a child that's in mental health care because of issues they're going through, and they're refusing to take medication and refusing to get help. If they then learn that the same doctor that signed off my father's killer into the streets is the one looking after their child or their friend or partner, how are they supposed to deal with that?
I think just one other sort of point as well is that similar to James, and I know with the Kumar family as well, that we have, you know, we have people reaching out to us who are desperate, families who are desperate, and they have people in care, people with mental health issues, and you know, I've been engaging with a lady who messaged me to say, and the reason I did read the message was it said, Emma, my son's going to be the next Valdo Calocane, can you help? And you think, my God, what do you do? But this isn't peculiar to just Nottingham. This is an entirely different part of the country.
James, as you've said, and Sandra, in your profession, I'm sure you get many people talking to you anecdotally about the struggles they have with mental health provision wherever they are in the UK, and they're asking for help. Calocane's family asked for help on multiple times. Should this be a watershed moment? Because I'm not comparing the suffering of families by any means, but they've been through something and they tried to raise the alarm and they were not listened to. Does that need to change? The voices of those closest to the mental health problem being included in the treatment, because it sounds like they were just not listened to.
Well, I think other agencies weren't listened to. I mean, at the end of the day, let's not forget when Calocane was first, as you mentioned, scared a young lady to the point where she had to jump out of a first-floor window. Another agency, the police, was involved. Why didn't the police charge Valdo Calocane then? Why weren't agencies working together to get a good public safety outcome? I just think that right from 2020, when he was diagnosed, agencies did not work together. Either mental health trusts or the police at that time didn't. So things need to change, because at that time Valdo Calocane should have been charged and he would have had a police profile. But for a serious injury that someone suffered because of jumping out of a first-floor window,
I think they
Calocane wasn't
surgery,
charged.
didn't they?
And they required surgery, and they weren't charged for that offence. And if Calocane had, this would have been multi-agencies looking after public safety, but they failed to charge him for that. How does the CPS in Nottingham justify that?
Given what we know now after reading this report, can we talk about diminished responsibility? The decision to allow Calocane to plead guilty due to diminished responsibility rather than facing a murder trial. Your lawyers have said that, you know, any legal route to changing that, getting a retrial or getting it to look again, those paths just aren't there. You would set a legal precedent. It's never been done before if that were to happen. Emma, are you willing to take that on?
Yes, of course I am, because it's such a grievous wrong. Once the truth is fully uncovered, then we will cross that bridge. Absolutely, yes.
The basis of the trial was that Calocane had treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia, and that's why he was convicted in the way he was. We have now got 3 agencies that have published. The Care Quality Commission has said he did not have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. The Mental Health Trust have said emphatically he did not have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. And now the Trust report has confirmed he didn't have treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. So if that was the basis of what the sentences were passed on, then if that basis is wrong, as families, we can't understand why that basis wouldn't be challenged by and even looked at by someone like Lord Justice Turner, who ultimately passed that sentence, because that sentence to us is not right.
No, it's wrong, and I think it's when all of this began, when we started to have our very grave concerns towards the end of 2023, we managed to secure a meeting with the then Justice Minister, Alex Chalk. And he said, and I've quoted this many a time, but it's true, he said, Emma, just because it's a law, it doesn't mean that it's right, and just because it's a law, it doesn't mean it can't change. So I'll just leave it there. But I would also say one last point is that the trial by doctors, this is expert evidence that's been given.
Is that why statutory public inquiry is so important, to get this evidence looked at again in the public domain, compel people?
We've been denied access to see those reports in full from the expert witness doctors. So we need, those must be seen, they must be checked, cross-examined, and do you know what? If they were entirely correct, then so be it.
James, I want to pick up on something that you've talked about, and that is the toll that it's taken on you personally, on all the families, not just what happened to you, what happened to your families 18 months ago, but this constant battle to get answers, to hold people to account, to get proper change, long-lasting change. How does it feel to know that the authorities, the systems in place that are meant to be there to help you do that, are the ones that failed? And now you're sitting here saying we are going to make that change, we are going to set the legal precedent, we are going to make sure that, you know, there is accountability and people do things differently. How does that feel? Because that must weigh heavy on your shoulders. I can see it with you sitting here.
It does, because I feel like none of us can really start grieving at the moment. We're still suffering, we still go through the traumatic experiences constantly through all these different inquiries and investigations, all the press and interviews. We're just reliving that time over and over and over again. And there has to be something that can take us over the line and get us to the point where we can look back and look at the memories and the good times that we've had with our family and start looking to the future and have a positive outlook.
Emma, every time I talk to you, we reflect on this. There's so much more for you all to do. You want a statutory public inquiry, we've touched on that. Nottinghamshire Police currently being investigated for their failings in this case. And you're meeting with the government next week. You don't just want to talk to ministers now. You want to talk directly to the Prime Minister, Emma.
We have to. We shouldn't be campaigners. We shouldn't be. I think it's shameful that any of us are here, that we're having to deal with this. But if we don't, no one else will. So yeah, we do. It's time. It's time now. We do want to speak to Keir Starmer, again to Wes Streeting, to the Attorney General, Home Secretary. You know, we have met them. We've met them in piecemeal, but yeah, we just need to get this done. And I think that we're focusing today on the failings with the NHS. Do not forget how grievous the failures were by Leicestershire Police and Nottinghamshire Police from 2020 up to now. All of that must be covered, and there's accountability to be had within those agencies as well.
Well, as has been the case ever since their loved ones were killed, the families there find themselves not only grieving for their children and their father, but also leading the campaign for accountability and trying to bring about that change. That isn't and shouldn't be their job. But as they see it, if they don't do it, who will? We have asked to speak to the Health Secretary in response to today's report, as well as NHS England and the NHS Trust involved in Calocane's care. They all declined. Instead, they sent us statements admitting failings and promising to learn from them. But no one will come onto the programme to answer questions, the Nottingham family's questions, to discuss those failings and the circumstances that allowed Calocane to be free to kill Barnaby, Grace and Ian. They won't come onto this programme to be held accountable. And how can they say lessons are going to be learned when the Health Service's first instinct was to only publish a summary of today's report rather than the whole thing? It could look like a cover-up, brushing it all under the carpet. Not my words, but those of the families. It's only because of their determination, fuelled by anger, trauma and grief, that the full detail is out in the public domain today. And the invitation to the authorities involved doesn't expire after today. If you are watching tonight, we're ready to put those questions to you at any time. Well, the Nottingham attacks represent a failure by the state to carry out one of its most basic tasks, as we've been reflecting, keeping people safe. And in that regard, there have been real parallels drawn with the Southport attack. Today, the government published a review into authorities' handling of Axel Rudikabana, revealing that the Prevent Counter-Terrorism Scheme closed its case on him prematurely, 3 years before he murdered 3 children last year. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, has this report.
Axel Rudikabana's obsession with violence, war and terrorism was alarming enough for his schools to report him to the government's counter-terrorism programme. But 3 times they assessed him. 3 times they took no action. 3 years after that final assessment, he walked into a dance event in Southport and killed 3 young girls. The murders of B.B. King, Elsie Stankham and Alice Aguiar led to an urgent review into the handling of Rudikabana by the Prevent programme. Its conclusion, that he posed significant risk, certainly enough to keep those cases open.
The review concluded that too much focus was placed on the absence of a distinct ideology, to the detriment of considering the perpetrator's susceptibility, grievances and complex needs. There was an under-exploration of the significance of his repeat referrals and the cumulative risk, including his history of violence.
The opposition drew parallels between the perpetrators in Southport and in Nottingham.
Both Valdo Calocane and Calocane could potentially have been sectioned and detained. And if that, under the Mental Health Act, and if that had happened, perhaps these murders could have been avoided.
The government's accepted all of the review's recommendations. The thresholds for action by Prevent are being looked at.
The important thing is that this is used, to actually look at the future, and also just to be realistic that we're facing, a very chaotic landscape of different violent people carrying out horrific attacks for different reasons.
It is unusual for the findings of reviews like this to be made public. The fact they have been is a recognition of those serious questions about how someone who was known to the authorities could have been able to carry out such an atrocity here, and how the families of those who died and those who were injured deserve answers. For so many, the cost of those failings will be with them forever. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
Well, Becky Johnson is here with me in the studio to reflect on the parallels between the two huge stories we've been covering, the Nottingham attacks and the Southport attack of last summer. And what we've been learning about throughout the course of this programme tonight, and indeed throughout the course of the day, is that the failings we're talking about when it comes to the authorities in charge of these kind of cases and these kind of people is there are basic errors, but there are also failures within the system, bigger, overarching problems.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the parallels, and the parallels are really striking. These are two individuals that carried out horrendous killings of innocent people. And yet, in the years leading up to those killings, there were huge red flags. There were warnings from people who knew them. Family members in both cases were trying to get help, mental health help. There was police involvement, mental health team involvement, Prevent involvement in the case of the Southport killer. But the issue is that a lot of these agencies will say, well, perhaps they don't meet the threshold for our agency. Perhaps they'd be better off dealt with by another agency. And it's thresholds and it's waiting lists. And if people fail to engage with mental health services, as both the Nottingham killer and the Southport killer did, then nobody seems to chase it up. Yeah. And where do they go? They fall through the cracks of agencies that are busy. We know how overstretched they are. We hear from people who work in these places that talk about how extremely busy they are. But then some of the errors just seem so basic. We just heard Emma Webber talking about note-taking. Note-taking is poor. And Calocane, when he was an inpatient, was taking his medication. So the inpatient staff, the hospital staff was saying,
see a problem.
Well, he's fine.
He's a low risk.
He's fine. But the community staff were saying, well, hang on, we know he's so dangerous. We're not going to his house alone. And it just seemed to oscillate between the two, where nobody was clearly joining the dots and saying, well, why does this man end up being sectioned? Why, when he goes into the community, does he end up carrying out, violent crime against innocent, random people? What's going on? There just doesn't seem to be the professional curiosity.
And we're talking about accountability now, aren't we? And that's something the Nottingham families are really big on. And again, in the Southport attack case, people want accountability, they want answers. But it seems like in all of this, we needn't have got to this stage if some organisation had taken responsibility, because as you've just outlined there, these two young men passed from pillar to post, and with no one taking responsibility for them, we end up at this, which, these two cases extremely rare, but a huge public safety concern in both cases.
Huge public safety concern, and it sadly makes you wonder how many other people are there out there. Emma Webber referred to the fact that she'd received a message from somebody saying that...
She said she's had messages from all over the country. It's not just one mental health trust.
Yeah.
This is just a snapshot of what is happening across the country.
There'll be people sitting at home watching this tonight thinking that maybe somebody they know could be the next Valdo Calocane. And they don't know where to go to get help because they'll be on a mental health services waiting list. They may have been involved with the police, but the police will have referred them on or charged them or not charged them. There just doesn't seem to be anywhere where these people can go. And even the teachers of the Southport attacker kept referring him to Prevent. And then, on one occasion, a spelling error meant that he didn't show up as somebody who'd been previously referred, so the case is just closed. So this is what I mean, there's system errors and then there are basic errors, and there will be individuals who have made mistakes, and you can understand why when the Nottingham families look at that report, they want to know the names of those individuals, and they've said it's not a witch hunt, but at the end of the day, if people have made such catastrophic errors of judgment or mistakes, they need to be accountable for them.
Becky, thank you. Becky Johnson looking into the parallels there between the Nottingham attacks and the Southport attack and the failure by authorities. Thank you. So to come here on the programme, a warning from one of the godfathers of AI about the existential dangers of superintelligence. And back to the beginning, Ozzy Osbourne reuniting with Black Sabbath for one more gig. We'll have all the details for you. And Badger Honour, this graffiti fan in East Sussex earning one of the top prizes in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Now, one for the heavy metal fans, a last chance to see this band live. Black Sabbath are back. Ozzy Osbourne reuniting with the band for one final performance. It'll be the first time in 20 years that they've all been on stage together, with the group playing a charity concert at Villa Park in Birmingham in July. Our arts and entertainment correspondent caught up with Ozzy's wife, Sharon, and started by asking her how this final gig came about.
Ozzy's one regret for everything that's happened to him in the last 6 years was he said he never got a chance to say thank you to his fans. And here we are. He's going to say thank you. He's going to give back to the city with his brothers who are Sabbath. And so it's the perfect farewell. And, you know, all his friends, all of Sabbath's friends are here to support them. And it's just an amazing that, you know, to say goodbye with your friends and your brothers, it's, you couldn't ask for anything more. And to do it at Villa Park, you know, I was just telling you, Ozzy's house is less than a mile away where he was born and brought up.
I mean, it's going to be a hugely emotional day for him, for you guys as well, presumably. Are you expecting it to be a lot of tears or...?
A lot of tears, but a lot of great memories and a great way to go out. And I said to somebody earlier this morning, can you imagine that photo at the end of the show with Sabbath and all of the bands that came to play tribute and to contribute to the charities for Birmingham? You know, it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the charities, a win for the fans, a win for all the musicians, because they'll have it's a joyous day.
For those that won't have read the details, talk us through the names of the people that you've got. The supergroup sounds terrific with Tom as well. Have people sort of got wind of this happening and wanted to play, or how did it happen?
No, they hadn't. They hadn't. And it was just, you know, phone calls around to all the bands that have, you know, it's like a family because they all love the same genre of music. They are here for the love of the music and to play tribute, and nobody is getting paid. Nobody. This is all for charity, and so it's a win-win for everybody. The guys are going to have the best time, you know, all the different artists that are getting up playing with each other, and then you've got the bands who are coming as the bands, you know, playing with their own bands. So it's just the perfect day.
Talk us through the charities, though, themselves. One of those charities is Cure Parkinson's. Has what the family have been going through in the last couple of years, has that made it made you want to, I guess, acknowledge the hard work that these people are doing to sort of try and find a cure for Parkinson's?
That's just it. You know, there is no cure right now, and to be able to make a big donation to them to help find a cure, it makes you feel good at the end of the day. And to hope that in our lifetime there will be a cure, not for Ozzy, but for the younger generation. They will have a cure, so that is so important. And also for the kids' hospital, the kids' hospice, it's nice to be able, at the end of the day, to give back and say thank you.
I'm joined now by Executive Director of Touring at Live Nation, Andy Copping. Andy, good evening to you.
Good evening. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. This has got people very excited, and I just want to sort of gauge, in terms of big gigs, where is this one going to rank?
I mean, it's up there. For me, it's a big gig, not dissimilar to, you know, Live Aid, Freddie Mercury tribute. Big. Getting all these bands to perform on one day is incredible. And interestingly, every band that we approached, every one of them was like, yeah, we're in. We want to do this. It's a great cause. They love Ozzy. They love Black Sabbath. And it's just going to be a fantastic day.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, actually, Andy. Sharon Osbourne made it sound easy, like a few phone calls were made and everybody said yes. And as you well know, it doesn't normally work like that, does it? But this just shows the excitement around it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on this now for nearly 2 years to get it together. And yes, you make a few phone calls. Some of it, it's really easy. Others, you know, we have to put a little bit of time in. But most of it, really, when you get through directly to the artist, is that they want in. They understand the significance of this iconic gig.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years in the making, you've kept a secret really well there. And we've not seen Ozzy Osbourne of late. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 2020. How is he doing in terms of, you know, this is a one gig, it's not a big tour, which we know takes its toll on artists who are in the best of health. But how's he doing ahead of this gig, and how's the preparation going?
Ozzy's doing great, and you know what? We've given him a goal. This is what he wanted to happen. He felt that he missed out on the last tour, because unfortunately the last tour got cancelled due to his ill health. And he felt he needed and he wanted to do something for the fans. Talking obviously with his other band members and getting the original Black Sabbath back together. And, you know, it was down to us to put it together and make it work for him. He's completely stoked about this. He cannot wait. And, you know, we've given him a goal and something for him to, you know, to surge for. And, yeah, we know he's going to be amazing on the day.
Oh, well, the clamour for tickets is going to be huge. I mean, the clamour for Oasis tickets, I'm sure, has got nothing on this. Just quickly, what date are they released, Andy?
We released the tickets at 10 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of February, a Valentine's gift.
How lovely.